Well, hey, welcome to the Conversations podcast, where we believe conversations create change. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode. I am your host, Mike, and I am here with the hostess with the mostest, the girl in the baby blue turtleneck sweater, my beautiful wife, Stephanie Gonzalez.
That was a really big entrance.
Well, you're welcome. It was a big entrance for a big, beautiful sweater. How are you doing today?
Are you hating on my sweater?
I'm not hating on it at all. I actually really like it. I like the turtleneck vibes.
It's really cold outside.
It gives me boss lady vibes, you know?
That's funny.
Well, anyways, we are super excited for another episode today. I don't know. I don't think we've ever taken the time to really talk about this or to just mention it, but I'm a pastor.
Oh, I mean, I think so.
And you're a marriage and family therapist.
I am.
And one of the things that often come up, like for us, as far as like discussions and things to talk about, are usually relationships.
That's right.
My life is surrounded with people, many people who are single, many people who don't want to be single, many people who are in relationships, then they no longer want to be in relationships. Everyone's having like relational drama. I know this is true for you too, as a marriage and family therapist.
That's right. Yeah. I get to just see a lot of amazing couples.
Yeah.
And so usually, unfortunately, a lot of couples come to therapy when things are,
right,
kind of falling apart.
Right.
And I get the honor of walking them through that.
Well, you're an amazing therapist. If you were not my wife, you'd be my therapist.
Okay. That's weird.
Oh. Needless to say, one of the things that we're just really passionate about is having the opportunity to pour into relationships, whether you're married, thinking about getting married, engaged, wherever you find yourself at. We're hoping that some of the lessons and some of the tools that we've learned in our journey can help you. And we're grateful for all the resources that we've picked up along the way. So today, we're actually going to be talking about something that I feel is extremely important. Okay?
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be talking about 4 things that can destroy a relationship.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Sounds so dramatic.
It is dramatic. I think,
but it kind of is dramatic.
It kind of, yes, it totally can be. And some of these 4 characteristics usually show up in the middle of conversations that are heated.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that we argue. I would say that we like verbally joust.
I hate it when you say that.
Yeah, we verbally joust.
We passionately disagree.
I've never heard you say that. That's funny. We passionately disagree about some things. Well, since we're going to talk about some of these 4 relationship destroyers.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so intense.
I know. But you know what? It's a little less intense than what it's actually called.
Yeah.
Because what it's actually called, by the way, shout outs to John and Julie Gottman. If you've never seen our podcast, please subscribe. You guys are our heroes. John and Julie Gottman came up with this concept called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Dun, dun, dun.
That is intense.
That is intense.
Okay, now, 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is a nod to the book of Revelation. And basically, the book of Revelation is all about it is the end, right? So basically, if you find yourself in your relationship and you are experiencing these 4 attributes or characteristics like time after time after time, it might be a sign that you're probably near the end of your relationship. But the good news is you can save it.
That's right.
You can change the patterns.
Yeah.
You can make it work. But since we're going to talk about these 4 things and everybody has gone through them, I think we should talk about something that comes up in our marriage pretty often.
Oh, my Lanta.
It's a problem that I have. And I think that the podcast community is a perfect place to talk about these issues. Yeah, okay. I really do. I really do.
I'm so interested.
Because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is something that happens at every time we're in a car.
In our car?
In our car.
Okay.
You have so many comments about my driving. You know, like I feel like I'm in traffic school every time we're going somewhere. You're always criticizing my driving.
You always. Oh, this is how not to bring up.
Okay,
something.
let's not. This is about you right now. So, like, I'm either driving too fast, I'm driving too slow,
right.
I'm not paying enough attention, or the music is too loud.
I think it's important that we give some context.
What other context is needed?
Do you want to talk about how when you are eating in the car, you drive with your knees?
That is not true. This is not true.
Don't use your hands?
This is not true.
My life is in danger.
I cannot believe that you're even bringing this up right now. This is crazy. Your life is in danger? Yeah, let's talk about this. How about the other day, you just got some new glasses? How about the other day you were driving at nighttime, which rarely happens, by the way.
I'm a passenger princess.
By the way, let's talk about this. You're a passenger princess, and you're always criticizing the driver. But you were driving the other day. It was nighttime. You were wearing your glasses. You were like, "Oh my God, babe, you know what's crazy?" I'm like, "What?" You're like, "I can actually see." And I'm like, "Yeah." And you were like, "Yeah, the thing is, I haven't been able to see for the last 8 years at nighttime while I've driven." I'm like, "You've put our life in danger for 8 years."
Yeah. All right, let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, that's a criticism, right?
Yes, that is.
Do you want to talk about how you get defensive about
No, I don't want to talk about it.
Cookies in the pantry? Well,
I don't get defensive. I'm just passionate.
Proceeds to get defensive. And how whenever I'm like, "Babe, I just got these cookies.
Oh my God.
Where are the rest of the cookies?"
You're not going to talk about the cookies.
And then you get defensive saying, "Well, I told you not to buy cookies because if you buy the cookies, I'm going to eat them." Or you blame a friend like Anthony. He ate all the cookies.
First of all, you shouldn't even be buying cookies because you have a dairy allergy. That's number one.
First of all, they're dairy
Number
free.
2, we have a trainer. You know that you cannot buy cookies.
It's about balance.
And you're putting cookies in front. And on top of that, Anthony did eat all the cookies.
Do I sense some defensiveness? These are two of the things we're going to talk about today. Criticism and defensiveness.
Whatever. Let's just move past us for a second. Okay.
You brought it up.
Apparently,
not me. I'm not going to bring this up.
Apparently, we have some things that we still need to work on. But in all seriousness, we do want to talk about some of these things that can come up, especially in a heated discussion, whether it be criticism or defensiveness like we're going to talk about, or there's going to be 2 other things that we're going to talk about as well.
That's right. Right. Yeah. And I actually love it's called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And we refer to them as the 4 things that can quietly destroy your relationship. And I actually love the research behind it because doctors John and Julie Gottman, they're just incredible. And they're experts in our fields of marriage and family therapy. And Dr. John Gottman can actually determine within the first few minutes of seeing a couple interact, especially if it's around some conflict, whether or not they are going to separate and get a divorce.
Is he a psychic?
No, he's not a psychic, but it has to do with these 4 things.
Yeah.
And so if you're engaging in these 4 behaviors that we're going to talk about today, there, that's just an alert sign. It's like an alarm system. Hopefully will go off inside of you and say, "Oh my gosh, hold on. I actually engage in this pattern. I engage in these behaviors. I engage in this way of communicating. And it sounds like maybe it's time for us to get some help."
Yeah.
And so hopefully, you're not doomed. Your relationship is not over.
For sure.
However, it can be if you don't start to work on these things.
100%. Okay, let's talk about the first one. The first thing that can destroy your marriage, especially if you do this repeatedly, is criticism. I would say that criticism is one of the worst things that you can do in a marriage. Now, when I talk about criticism, what I'm not talking about is you not voicing or mentioning the things that frustrate you. In fact, I feel like if you go through time without mentioning the things that do frustrate you, that can be it could be unhealthy. But if you've been married long enough, one of the things that you have probably learned is that it's not always what you say, it's how you say it. In fact, I love what Jesus said. Jesus says, always deliver truth with some grace, right? Criticism is the complete opposite of that. Criticism is not attacking the problem. Criticism is attacking the person's character. Let me give you a very simple example of what this can look like. Let's say, wives, your husbands forget to take out the trash, right? A critical voice would say, "My gosh, I am so frustrated that you forgot to take the trash out. You always forget to take the trash out. You are so lazy." That is a critical tone. Now, there's a different way where you can express that frustration without being critical. Option B would be, "Hey, babe, just want to let you know that the garbage truck came. We forgot to take the trash out. And it really frustrates me when we forget to take the trash out. Can you do me a favor and just please make sure that next week the trash is out?" Did you catch the difference there? You see, the first one attacked the person. The second one attacked the problem. it attacked the problem. So here's my encouragement to you. Whenever there is a tension in your relationship, make sure that you do not make the tension more important than the person that you're in relationship with, right? And the way that we do this is by criticizing the person rather than criticizing the issue. In fact, when you choose not to be critical, as a team, you can come up with a partnership and a plan on how to overcome the problem that you are talking about. Now, there's a couple things that can happen when we get critical. When we get critical, we can lower the self-esteem of our partner. When we get critical, it can cause them to want to shut down. When we get critical, it can cause them to not want to be in conversation with us, or it can make them fearful about having conversations that are difficult to have. But when we speak positively about a person's character, when we reinforce them correctly, I think that these conversations can go a lot better. So, point number one, don't be critical.
Yeah, and I think it's important to know that this it creeps in.
Right.
It oftentimes starts really small.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts small because we have a complaint
Right.
about a person's actions.
Yep.
And we don't know how to properly articulate that complaint.
Right.
And so then we go directly towards making a complaint about the person instead about the action. And so we want to be really careful with that, because we don't want to destroy our partner's confidence. We don't want to send them the message, you are not good enough.
Right.
And that's what criticism does. Criticism sends the message, what you're doing and who you are is not enough.
Right.
And that will eventually destroy the relationship.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And I think it's also important to note, I know we come from the Hispanic culture, right? And a lot of us grew up around around a very critical environment. And unfortunately, oftentimes criticism is a projection of how we feel about ourselves.
Correct.
Have you ever heard a person say, "I'm my worst critic"?
Yeah.
Well, you're probably a critical person in general if you are your worst critic.
It's fantastic,
because now you're projecting that onto your partner, and now your partner feels the same way that you do, which is not enough.
100%. Which leads, what I think is interesting about these 4 things that can destroy your relationship is that these always snowball on top of each other.
Yeah.
Like when the first thing isn't taken care of, it evolves to something else, which leads to the second thing that can destroy relationships.
Yeah, and that's contempt. The research shows that contempt is actually the number one thing that will destroy your relationship.
Correct.
So if you engage in this type of behavior, your relationship is doomed, right? Because contempt is not just criticism. Contempt is criticism with an air of superiority. It makes the other person feel demeaned. It diminishes the other person's character. It has to do with sarcasm, right? Like a lot of people utilize sarcasm as a way of communicating. I'm sorry to tell you, but that's contempt, and that sarcasm can leak into your relationship and can belittle the other person and not make them feel like they are valued or like they are enough.
Right.
It comes off also as mocking.
Yeah.
Right. It can also come off as we can communicate contempt with our body language, right? Like when you're scoffing or like when you're rolling your eyes, that's contempt, and I understand a lot of these behaviors that we're going to talk about, these 4 behaviors, they often come from our inability to be able to express our frustration in a healthy way. That lets us know that we don't have the actual skill to communicate in a way that is effective. But we want to be really careful with contempt, because contempt completely destroys trust and it completely destroys respect in a relationship, which are 2 of the most foundational things that a relationship needs in order for it to survive, right? And so a lot of people are like, well, what does contempt look like? Like, I'm not contemptuous, right?
Ooh, contemptuous. Good word. Never heard that one before, but that's good.
But that an example of a person that is showing up in this way, that is engaging in this kind of behavior, is, for example, I don't know, let's say that you forgot an important date.
Like an anniversary or
a date night, or a birthday, or, a date night. And instead of communicating with the person in a healthy way would sound like, man, it really hurt my feelings that our anniversary came and went and you forgot about it. It doesn't make me feel valued. when you communicate with contempt, it could sound like, of course you forgot.
Yeah.
Of course you didn't remember the date that is our anniversary.
Yeah.
And you're just communicating with that sense of like belittling. Of course you did.
Yeah.
Of course you weren't going to do anything.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me.
It doesn't surprise me.
Right.
Right. And you roll your eyes and or you kind of say it with a smirk,
Right.
with a laugh.
Right.
That's belittling of a person's, character and just humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And trust and emotional safety is so important. And when you engage in contempt, you are completely eroding that emotional safety, and it creates distance between you and your partner. I want to be careful with talking about this because it can sound so extreme,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's like, whoa, hold on, is that abuse? And so if you're not careful, of course, so we're not talking about these behaviors in the context of an abusive relationship, right? I want to be super clear about that.
Right.
This is like the everyday normalized, couple that is struggling with these kinds of things.
Yes, but if you do that often,
of course,
it could be abusive.
Of course, 100%.
If you're constantly belittling somebody,
of course,
yeah.
and mocking them,
Right.
and belittling them, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of like viewing them like if you are
Right.
above them,
Yep.
and not viewing each other as equals.
Right.
And so, yeah, you want to be careful with that, because emotional safety is everything
Correct.
in a relationship, and contempt erodes that,
Yep,
and it
absolutely.
happens so steadily at first,
Yes.
and it progresses
Correct.
over time.
Correct.
So you don't want to let that progress. The relationship will actually be over.
Yep, 100%. Okay, so the first one that can destroy a relationship silently is criticism. The second one that can destroy a relationship silently is contempt.
Yeah.
And here's the third one, is that you're going to get defensive. Now, like Steph said, we're not just talking about relationships that are like super, super bad. We're talking about the every single day relationship. Now, here's the problem with being defensive. When you're defensive, you fail to be validating. Okay? Defensiveness is always usually from a place where we're trying to like preserve ourselves. We're trying to guard ourselves if we're feeling insecure about an area. But usually when you're in a relationship that's generally healthy, I shouldn't let that be in the way. I shouldn't try and feel like I need to like protect myself, because what's actually happening is that your partner's probably just trying to connect with you. So for instance, because I got defensive, I completely missed the reality, which simply was that Steph actually just wanted to connect with me that day. She missed me. But because I got defensive, I didn't create a bridge for us to connect. In fact, I actually created a wedge, right? So the way that you can not be defensive is by making a decision to validate. Now, how do you do this? Instead of just telling your reasons as to why you did X, Y, and Z, or instead of just trying to defend yourself, take an opportunity, be silent, allow the other person to speak. And here's a game changer, right? If you want to have the other person feel heard, just simply repeat what they said. Maybe my wife can tell me, Mike, it really hurt me today that, we didn't talk. I feel disconnected. I feel like you didn't call me. Instead of me getting defensive and saying, I'm super busy, I think a better thing would be, hey, babe, what I'm hearing you say is that you feel really disconnected because we haven't had the opportunity to talk today. And I'm so sorry. I really want to make sure that I connect with you. And I'm going to make sure that next time I'm going to put some procedures in place or a process in place for us to be able to connect. You never want to allow defensiveness to create a bigger wedge in your relationship.
Yeah, and the problem with defensiveness is that it shifts blame, right? And a lot of times people get defensive, like you said, because they're trying to self-preserve, right? And in that attempt of self-preserving, maybe internally they feel bad.
Yep.
They feel bad because, oh man, oh crap, I went all day and I really didn't talk to my wife.
Yep.
And in you feeling bad, you're trying to self-preserve from that feeling because you don't want to feel bad.
Right.
Nobody wants to feel bad. And so then you shift up, how come you didn't call me?
Yeah,
all
exactly.
Day,
Yeah.
And
if you wanted to talk, you should have sent me a text.
So you shift the blame.
Never done that before.
So you shift the blame and you get defensive, right? And with an offense and defense, like you're not on the same team. You're either on defense or you're on offense.
Right.
And so you have to remember, when you're in a relationship, you are on the same team.
Yep.
And so being defensive will just create a barrier that is unnecessary. We want to be intentional about listening to the person, like leaning into the other person and listening to understand them and validating that,
Right.
And then you will be, understood.
100%. And I love what you said about taking ownership, because taking ownership is always the key to growth.
Yeah.
If you fail to own where you have made mistakes, you'll never own how to get better and how to move forward.
That's right. Yeah. It's going to prohibit you from growing.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked about the first three
We have.
horsemen, and now the fourth one is called stonewalling.
Oh, snap.
Stonewalling. Stonewalling, aka the silent treatment,
Uh-oh.
aka shutting down.
The cold shoulder.
The cold shoulder.
Yes.
Yeah. It's when a person emotionally or physically withdraws from a relationship. A lot of times this happens because a person gets so overwhelmed or they get so flooded with emotion and they don't know how to respond, or if they do respond, they're like, it's not going to be nice or it's not going to be good. And so they make the decision to shut down. Your entire system just shuts down because you're so overwhelmed that you cannot continue. And now I do want to say, it is absolutely normal if you need some space from the conversation, if it's getting tense. I actually really recommend that a lot of times. Like when we are feeling flooded, it's not the best time to have a productive conversation. However, let's say in the middle of an argument or in the middle of a discussion, you just get up and you leave, or your partner's trying to sit there and say, hey, I'd really like to have this conversation about X, Y, and Z. And you're just sitting there and you're like, or you grab your phone and you're like scrolling and your partner's trying to talk to you. That creates emotional distance. That creates a disconnection, right? Because what your behavior and what your silence is communicating is that they're not important enough in that moment. Their feelings are too much for you to handle. So you want to be careful with this concept of shutting down. I know that that's something that I've personally struggled with, right? When I get really flooded, I just need some time. But the key is knowing yourself, having that self-awareness. That's the first step. What is it that whenever I'm getting overwhelmed, what is it that I do? Do I just act out in anger? Do I emotionally shut down? Do I feel like I need to run away? Right. And when you gain that awareness, then you can start changing, these things.
Right.
Stonewalling also disrupts the ability to have productive conversations. Right? Because then the other person is going to be like, well, I can't even talk to you.
Right.
Right? Because you're completely shut down.
Yeah.
And so instead of completely shutting down, it would be a good idea for you to just articulate, just say it with your words, saying, hey, I'm starting to feel really overwhelmed in this conversation, and I'm just going to need a couple of minutes.
Right.
And in a couple of minutes, I'll come back and, we can have a better, more productive conversation, but I can't show up for you right now.
Yeah.
And you give yourselves the time. Now, in that time, don't sit down and wallow.
Right.
Don't sit down and hype yourself up.
Yeah.
In that time, take a deep breath, write it down, journal, practice some breathing, do something that will help you ground yourself so that you can come back and actually have a productive conversation. But what I've noticed is that in this dynamic, like when couples are engaging in this pattern, and it doesn't even have to be couples, like friends do this, like people, in friendships, people in their workspace,
right.
people in families, like they communicate like this because you don't know what you don't know until you learn something different.
Correct.
Right. And so, I think it's important for us to just talk about these things. That way people are aware. And now hopefully you can walk away and you can think about, man, how do I respond?
Right.
Like, what is my typical? Is my typical, like, I shut down?
Yep.
Is my typical to be like sarcastic and like be sassy right back?
Yeah.
Is my tendency to like roll my eyes and walk,
Yeah.
What is it? How do I normally act when I am feeling flooded or when I'm feeling angry or overwhelmed or misunderstood?
Right.
How do I engage? In which of these behaviors do I engage in? And now when you gain that type of self-awareness, now you have the ability to change.
100%. I think self-awareness is a game changer,
Yeah.
but sometimes self-awareness happens in the context of discipleship.
Yeah.
There's this one verse that says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another man. Right? Discipleship basically is this biblical word for the concept of people growing together.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think marriage is the greatest discipleship opportunity on the face of the planet. So maybe you're watching this podcast and you're thinking about the conversations, the arguments, the tension that you're feeling in your own relationship, but you're having a hard time determining why there's tension. Could it be because you're probably struggling with some of these areas, whether it be criticism, contempt, stonewalling? And if you're struggling to be aware of which one of these things you're actually struggling with, probably the best person to ask is your spouse. Now, when they respond, don't get defensive. Don't get defensive. And here's the good news. The good news is that if you've struggled with any of these areas, welcome to the club. We all have, right? Marriage is the most difficult, but also the most beautiful thing that you can ever be a part of. Usually people don't teach you how to be married. It usually happens along their journey. So the good news is that if you've struggled with any of those areas, you can break that pattern today.
That's right. Yeah, there's hope for your relationship just because you're engaging in one of these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse,
Dun, dun, dun.
or in one of these little ways that will destroy your relationship. There is still hope. You can learn the skill. I love what you said. Like, most of us don't know how to be married. Unfortunately, most people don't go through premarital counseling, which we strongly recommend, right? But even if you do all those things, you're still going to experience some struggle.
Never us, though. Never us.
in a relationship.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're two people that are completely different.
Two imperfect people coming together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, we're two imperfect people coming together with our own baggage. You know, oftentimes we don't realize that when we marry a person, we don't just marry the person. We marry their struggles. We marry their past.
Oh, snap.
We marry their trauma.
Yes.
Right? We marry the burdens that they have not yet worked through. And so we just want to bring some awareness to those things and also just instill some hope. If you're engaging, maybe now is a good time for you to say, you know what? I think it's time for us to go to therapy together.
Yep.
You know, it's a life-changing process where you can actually gain the skills and the tools that are necessary in order for you to make your relationship work and make it healthier.
Well, that's right. Hey, we are so grateful that you tuned in today to today's episode on the 4 things that can destroy your relationship. We want to thank you so much for just being with us on this journey. Do us a favor, though. Before you close that laptop, before you get out of your car, before you do whatever it is that you're doing that's going to stop you from listening or watching us, go ahead and subscribe. Subscribe to the YouTube. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on TikTok. Just follow us in on the journey so that you can be a part of the conversation. We love you. We believe your best days are in front of you, and we can't wait to see you in February.
Oh my gosh.
For Love Month. We'll see you guys. We'll see you guys soon.